Thank you for coming today. We, Group 2, will be looking at two separate ethical disasters and analyzing them. My team and I came up with several different criteria for this project. One of these criteria was to make sure that the ethics of this disaster were worthy of being shown to future engineers to ward them of making the same mistakes. We also want to find evidence in the money/business side to make sure that other new coming engineers can understand how business and ethics can clash in a modern workplace. We also want to look at the environmental impact, the economical, political, societal impacts, and the ethical implications of a corporation's decisions in a marketplace.
The Deepwater Horizon failure of the Macondo well site in the Gulf of Mexico was one of the worst engineering failures to date. The incident on April 20, 2010 resulted in the death of 11 crew and 118 injuries, which accounts for 100% of personnel aboard the rig. It is the second largest man-made oil spill in human history up to 2016 and resulted in over $80 billion in fines, penalties, and overall losses. Two primary safety features were largely to blame for the resulting failure. First is the blowout preventer, which is designed in a dual redundant dead man system that controls the blind shear ram. Its implementation is only a suggestion by the regulations and is unfortunately incapable of internal testing due to its design. There is also no ability to test the condition of the batteries. This specific blowout device was improperly wired and also improperly aligned. Improper alignment is never addressed within the regulations, and as such, there is no guidance as to its functionality, or more specifically, lack thereof. The improper wiring caused the batteries to drain, which hampered the deployment of one of the blind shear rams. The blind shear ram is designed to permanently seal off the shaft. The dual piston design collapses the pipe from both sides in an overlapping fashion to form a seal over the well and prevent further leaking. Aside from the improper alignment, the lack of both deployments prevented the well from sealing during the catastrophe. Additionally, the hydraulic pressure that should have been present in a fully functioning blind shear ram was insufficient to overcome the internal pressure of the oil being excavated from the well. Lessons learned from the event led to a new mandatory position. An ethics monitor was implemented to oversee that safety no longer takes a backseat in the pursuit of profits. Many of the investigations found that profit over safety was a mantra in the implementation and design of the rig. The crew aboard the rig was also improperly trained to respond to the magnitude of this disaster. Furthermore, many safety devices were found to have a high failure rate on not only this rig but many others in use. The government responded by founding the U.S. Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement due to the impact of immense environmental impact.
5 years after the spill, the Gulf states of Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas made a settlement for $20.8 billion, the largest settlement any single entity has ever been fined by the DOJ. This fine totaled with the $5.5 billion fine from violating the Clean Water Act adds up to a staggering $26.3 billion in fines. BP employees who were charged with crimes include Mr. Kurt Nix, a BP engineer who knowingly deleted evidence off his cellular device regarding the incident. David Rainey, the BP vice president for the exploration of the Gulf of Mexico, was charged with one count of obstruction of Congress and one count of false statements to the EPA and FBI about the oil flow rates from the rig. The last name worth mentioning is Donald Vidrine, the well site leader charged with purposefully misinterpreting tests at the well site.
General Motors put millions of customer lives in danger by not issuing a recall. Early prototypes show problem with torque requirement, and Kelvin Wolf and Eaton's Corporation discussed possible fix. Wolf is transfers to new job and raised the Geodrill take over Atlas Engineering for ignition switch. In the scenario, vehicle is in run. Ignition is turned from run to accessory either by contact from driver or vehicle is on the pumping roads with a heavy key change. This stage change turn off power to airbags, power steering, and power brake, making the vehicle harder to control. Engine stalls. because it is no longer in run. In the case of an accident, the driver and any passenger are left without the safety of airbags. In 2005, Maryland resident Amber Mary Rose, 16, died when her 2005 Chevrolet Cobalt crashed into the tree. After the ignition switch shut down the car's electrical system and airbag failed to deploy.
Some ethical issues with the GM scandal include the fact that GM released 2 ignition switches that were below the company's minimum specification. One of the NSPEC codes state that engineers should hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public, but this code was not followed. Also, Diageo was aware of the fact that the switches were faulty but decided to conceal it, which goes against the code that states that engineers should avoid deceptive acts. There were a lot of complaints from customers, but the special committee of engineers classified that problem as an issue of customer convenience instead of safety, thus reducing the chances that it will be taken seriously. Some societal impacts include the loss of lives as well as trauma from losing loved ones. As mentioned earlier, at least 97 people lost their lives because of this problem. Economic impacts include the fact that the company lost about $55 million to compensate victims. They also had to pay a fine of $35 million, and the cost of the car recalls was at least $1.7 billion. A political impact of this scandal was the fact that people started to wonder whether federal regulators had turned a blind eye towards GM, because from 2009 to 2013, GM was owned by the government. Some reasons for this unethical conduct by GM include they were trying to avoid great costs. GM's managers estimated that replacing the key ignition switch component would cost 90 cents per car, thus only saving 10 to 15 cents on warranty costs. So replacing all the switches would have cost quite a bit. Also, they were trying to avoid redesigning the electrical system. Other problems in the prototype stage of the faulty switch had caused the entire electrical system to be redesigned, and Diageo did not want to change that.